Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with yet another Godzilla review. I almost would call this Andy's Godzilla Reviews lately because there's been so many Godzilla figures that have just come out for the new Godzilla x Kong film. We have another one here, and this is the Giant Godzilla, and of course it's the Giant Godzilla Evolved because this is the newest sort of design for Godzilla, because apparently he evolves at some point during the course of the film. But you can see it looks pretty close to the same as the other ones, but obviously it is a lot larger, which will make this one pretty cool looking, I think, once we actually pop it out of the box. And then as you turn the box around and you take a look at the back, you've got kind of like a very cool image of the figure. Not really anything going on gimmick-wise with this one, it seems. It's just, the gimmick is that it's large, but of course it'll sport some articulation and stuff, I would imagine. So let's go ahead, as always, pop this out of the box and we'll check it out. So here is our Giant Godzilla, and I feel like maybe I should go a little bit higher with the camera just to kind of get the top of the head in screen there. But at first glance, it does actually look pretty decent. It has a nice looking sculpt, pretty much as they all have, and it looks okay for the most part. One thing I can say straight away is I'm not a big fan of the way that the transition occurs here on the tail. You can see that we go from the really cool translucent look here to just this paint, and the paint here, this light pinkish tone that we have applied here, does not at all mesh with that translucent pink that we have here. Like, the tones are super different, so it looks pretty ugly out there on the tail. Another thing, the tail is really fidgety. I don't like the tail. I actually had a heck of a time getting it on this figure, which I haven't had that issue with any of the other Godzillas in this line. It was really quite hard to get on, almost reminded me of a Beasts of the Mesozoic figure, so I had to go take it and heat it up with some hot water and then put it on, which I actually would recommend using a hairdryer rather than hot water, because I had to get a whole bunch of water out of the tail then. But once I applied the tail, it now seems like it's almost prone to fall off once I start to move it and articulate it, so it's not really all that great as far as that goes. And then there is another thing here that I'm not a huge fan of that, of course, was hidden within the packaging, and that is when we turn it around, we've got screw holes, and boy, do we ever have a lot of screw holes. If we count them, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screw holes that I can notice straight out of the gate on this side of the figure. So obviously we have a superior side, and then we've definitely got this very ugly side of Godzilla. Regardless, we're going to go ahead and jump straight to a closer look, and we'll check it out from there. So starting up here at the head sculpt of Godzilla, you can see it looks okay, pretty much like the others have so far. I don't really notice much that would be different on this one compared to the others. I think maybe the eye paint looks a little bit better on this one, just because it's not quite as large or sloppily placed as some of the others have had, so that's a plus for this one. You can also see that it seems like they tried to give it a bit of a gloss coat, because there is a nice sort of a satin shine to the eye, but that is also all over in the eye socket. So it wasn't applied perfectly, but it is at least an effort to give it a bit of realism. You can see the teeth look better than they have on some of the others, but by no means do they look great, but definitely better. You can see the paint is a little sloppy, but not terrible. We do have a tongue sculpted on the inside of the mouth, painted with a pinkish tone, and we actually have pink on the inside of the mouth on the upper side. Not much in the way of detail up there, but it is at least painted, so that's a plus. And obviously the articulated jaw does work pretty nicely, which is always fun. The color of this Godzilla is exactly the same as we've seen on all of the others up until this point, where we have the bluish tone for the body, then that greenish tone for the underbelly. The transition to get to that greenish tone is extremely smooth. It's very nice and naturalistic. However, again, I feel like this figure, just like a lot of the others, suffers from kind of poor detail. Like, when you look at it, you can see the actual detailing is very muted overall, and you see that as you move through the majority of the body. Like, a few of the gills you can see of Godzilla right here, they're almost not even recognizable, and the sad part is they actually look better on this one than they have on quite a few of the others. But the detailing on the underside as well is pretty muted. Again, I try not to complain too much about this because it is just a kid's toy. It's not like it's a Haya Godzilla or a NECA Godzilla. It's not meant to be the most highly detailed thing in the world. But when you're used to looking at Mattel, where their detail is so vibrant and so impressive, even on kids' toys, I just kind of at this point would like to see better detail on something like this, but I can understand why that wasn't a top priority on their part. As you lead up here into the top of the Godzilla, again, you can see that the spines are a totally separate piece, so that allows the entire back here of Godzilla to have that translucent pinkish tone, including the area that would be the skin of Godzilla. So as you move back, it's not just the spines that are that translucent material, you can see even the back of Godzilla is as well. But the spines absolutely stand out the way that they should. They definitely make the figure kind of jump out at you and look very impressive. So I do like the aspect of them being that translucent, see-through sort of really bright pinkish tone. Again, you have the darker pink, and then as you lead toward the center, they transition to a lighter pink, a more see-through sort of a look. But it is, again, not the best thing in the world because of the fact that the skin of the back remains that, translucent look, but the spines themselves do shine quite nicely. They do look really good, and you can see the detailing in those areas also looks pretty impressive. But as you lead back up here, you can see, again, we don't have any form of neck articulation or anything like that on the giant version. You do have arm articulation, but it's only up. That's actually as far down as it goes. It doesn't go any further than that for some reason. And that's about as tall as it can go. We can't move any further than that. So you can't completely, swivel it around. The detailing of the arm, again, continues to look like pretty much everything else on the figure, where it looks nice but still has a bit of a muted look. You do have painted nails, which the nail paint actually matches the coloration of the underside of Godzilla. As you lead down, you can see that Godzilla has definitely gotten himself into fitness lately, and he's got himself a nice thin stomach, which looks like maybe he's got some abs under here. You can also see, again, that the skin texture looks as it has through the course of the entire figure. As you lead down here into the legs, again, the same type of detailing, the scoots moving down, the osteoderms and stuff all over the place. We have articulation in the legs as well. You can go up about that far and down about that far, so he can stand really, really upright if you choose to have him stand that way, and he can also get into that running pose that we see him in the trailers. As you move down, you also have swivel articulation for the ankles, which is pretty nice to see. Again, the nails are painted on the feet. They, like everything else, have a bit of a muted look, but still look okay when it comes to the toes and everything. And then you lead out here into the tail. You've, of course, got the joint for the tail here, which basically gives you up and down movement, not much in the way of left and right, and just like I said, the tail is very fidgety, so if I mess with it too much, it'll pop right off again, and it's an absolute pain in the butt to get it on. But as you lead out through the length of the tail, again, you can see that we pretty much have that same type of look, but as you lead out, you can see that we, again, very abruptly transition from that translucent material to just a pinkish tone of color for the tail. And it doesn't look very good, it doesn't look very natural. The transition is very unnatural, but even the coloration just doesn't match up to what we see up there. But as you lead out, I think the detailing of the tail looks okay, maybe even a little better than we see through a large portion of the body, but you can see we again end with that very interesting new tail of Godzilla. One thing that's also interesting about this one is you have the greenish tone here on the underside, but it actually stops before we ever reach the tail. And I kind of feel like that might be the first time we had seen that in this line of Godzillas so far. The opposing side is going to look pretty much the same as far as the articulation of the arms goes. That one can actually move pretty far. That can go all the way back, pretty much the same distance in a downward position. The leg can go down really far and also actually up really high. He can get himself a nice big kick for this leg. But of course we do see the screw holes all over the place over here. Outside of the screw holes, I would think that the figure looks probably the same over here as what we had seen on the first side, but again, just lots of ugly, ugly screw holes, and the tail does curve in this direction. The figure is also really light for how large it is, which tells me that it's very hollow and has a little bit of a cheap feel to it, but again, it still is okay for what it is, but it's absolutely not one of my favorites from this line.
And there may be people watching the review and thinking, well, you just really need to take into consideration that these are kids' toys.
I'm looking at this through the adult collector perspective, so I look at it a little differently than what children will look at it as, but at the same time, I try to take that into consideration, the fact that they are just kids' toys, so I'm not being too harsh on the figure, but still pointing out whatever I feel like is a negative. I'm also not a big fan of the seam here where the head is connected. That's a bit ugly as well. But as far as a size goes, this is definitely the largest of the Playmates Godzillas. Not as large as the Giant Toys version, but definitely the largest of the Playmates versions. Lengthwise, about 21 inches or about 53, maybe 53.5 centimeters. And then for a height, just a hair under, maybe actually a hair over if I go to the spines back there, about 11.5 inches or around 29.5 centimeters would be the highest point. For a size comparison, here are our usual review comparison suspects, as we have Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect a Human Being next to our Godzilla. And you can see everything here is way smaller than Godzilla is. Obviously, when they say it's a giant Godzilla, it is exactly that. We've also got the Battle Roar version of the Godzilla, which this previously would have been the largest Playmates version I had reviewed, the Battle Roar version, but clearly the giant version is a good bit larger. There is also the Evolving Godzilla here as well, next to the Giant Godzilla, again showing you that this is still the biggest one that we've got. As well as the Hiya Toys Godzilla, which at this point, it's pretty clear that this Godzilla is a lot bigger than most Godzilla figures, but the one figure that I really want to bring in for a comparison that I know many people are interested in seeing would be the Giant Toys version, so let's go ahead and do that. So it is definitely apparent to me that the Giant Toys version remains the largest Godzilla of the new film that I've seen so far. It is clearly significantly larger and significantly better looking than the Playmates version. The Playmates version is definitely cool, you know, it's definitely got its place in the toy line, and I'm sure kids will enjoy it, but I think everybody, kids included, will enjoy the Giant Toys version more than the, giant Godzilla here from Playmates. So this brand new Godzilla X Kong, the new Empire Giant Godzilla, is okay. It's probably one of my least enjoyable figures from this line so far, just because it does have a bit more when it comes to downsides than a lot of the others. The impressive size I do like, it looks very cool because it's so big and it does stand out because of that aspect. But at the same time, it looks a little iffy. I think if you just have it up on your shelf standing there and you're not trying to really mess with it, it's a very cool collectible. It definitely is a nice representation, as far as I can tell, of the design of the new Godzilla. But at the same time, there are some pretty obvious downsides with the figure straight away. The screw holes are the worst thing about the figure as a whole. We all have issues when it comes to those ever since the Hasbro Jurassic World line, but these screw holes, again, are something I don't think they care too much about because, like I said, it's meant for kids. Kids aren't going to care about screw holes at all, but as far as an adult collector goes, the screw holes are definitely a downside. However, when you turn the Godzilla around and you look at it from the more superior side, it looks a lot nicer, definitely is a lot better as far as a display goes. But from that side, the only big downside for me would be the transition in the material from the tail there, where we have the nice translucent material, which I feel like could have looked cool the entire way out. But then we transition to that very obviously not the same tone of pink on the tail, and it just looks very off-putting and, not very good at all. It just does not look natural or smooth in any way. But I guess we're looking at Godzilla, so it's, there's not much natural about that. But again, on the underside, we also have that green tone that ends shortly before the tail, which is something that we haven't really seen on any of the other Godzillas either that I can recall, so that's a little bit of a downside as well. The articulation moves okay, but is a little limited, especially when it comes to trying to extend the arms or legs further up. But at the same time, I think they articulate in enough positions that you would probably need it for, except for the arms. I feel like the arms could have come down a little bit more, could have looked a little nicer if the arms came down a little further, but overall I think the articulation is okay as well. So this figure is not the best one to come along when it comes to these Godzillas. I definitely think the Jada Toys version is going to remain supreme when it comes to that aspect, but it is still a fairly fun figure as a whole. So if you are interested, head to your local Target because that's where I scored mine. It should be showing up at Walmart as well very soon. So one way or another, if you are interested, I hope you get a hold of it, and also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.